My name's Carrie Kalin. I've been a member of Parent Programs team since it started in 2001. We're an organization of the Olentangy local schools whose mission is to empower parents with information and skills critical to raising children in today's world. Our committee provides information through evening parent forums featuring nationally renowned and Central Ohio experts speaking on topics relevant to raising children and adolescents. Our group is made up of district administrators, guidance counselors, community liaisons, nurses, staffs, and parents from almost every school building in the district. And you would think after reading this 37 times, I would know it by heart, but I don't. Tonight, we have Dr. Stankovich, and would like to remind you to come to our spring presentation, which is Wednesday, March 19th. It will be at Liberty High School, and it is called Sanity Saving Strategies for Parents when Dealing with Alcohol or Other Drugs with Dr. Mike Thompson, who is also a local speaker. We will be having a book sale afterwards, and we also have a book raffle. If you want to turn your evaluation forms over, if you have a stamp on the back, you are the winner chicken dinner. And you cannot pick up your book until it is completely filled out. Because we read every single one. I'm serious, we do. We read every one and we use it to do our next forums. And we take everything you say into consideration. So when you finish filling those out, we'll have a box outside when you leave. And you can just deposit them in there. If you have a book, if you're winner of the raffle, one of us behind the desk can get you that. If you can take a moment to silence your cell phones. We don't need Carmen, Ohio going off during the presentation. And Dr. Stankovich will be speaking for roughly an hour, a little bit more. We'll have questions and answers, and he's willing to stay as long as he needs to answer, but I'm sure everything's going to be answered in the presentation. So help me welcome Dr. Stankovich.
Thank you very much. Thank you for coming back out. I know we had this scheduled about a week or so ago, and due to the weather we had to cancel. I really appreciate you fitting me back into your schedule. I also want to thank the Olentangy School District for having me out again. I was here a few years ago talking about youth sport parenting. Maybe some of you were here for that. And as you might have picked up from the title of this presentation and the fact that I just mentioned sports a moment ago, my areas of interest in which I practice and study and do research are primarily sport and health psychology. And so tonight, we're going to go light on the sports and a little bit heavier on the life success. And so the title of this presentation, Optimal Balance for Life Success, Strategies for Happiness, Health, and Peak Productivity. Just want to open this up because we've got a pretty diverse group here this evening. I see kids, I see adults, so I'm going to try to massage the message so that everybody can pick up some useful pointers. Part of what I've tried to do is distill down some of the psychobabble and some of the big terms into easy to understand and immediately applicable ways to improve the overall quality of your life. And so I want to break this down though. When I say happiness, we're talking about getting the most out of your life, day in, day out, finding meaning in the things that you do, the people you impact, be it through your work, your social relationships, your family, anything that you're involved with, really maximizing that experience. We talk about health. A lot of times you immediately think of physical health, but here I want to expand that to emotional health. Are you getting the most out of life, out of the relationships that you have, the interactions with others? Are you reading them appropriately? Sometimes we read body language and get a completely different message than what the person was intending. So there's a lot of work in the last 10 to 20 years on emotional intelligence. I'm sure many of you have heard that term. And then finally, peak productivity. How do you, whether you're a student here tonight, a parent, maybe you have a job outside of the school system, how do you maximize your abilities? How do you get the most out of what you have? And so through this presentation, I'll talk about some of these ideas, and at the end, I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have. Okay. A little bit about myself, just so you know who this guy is that's speaking to you tonight. For my entire life, as long as I can remember, I've always been fascinated by two types of people. The first is the person that seemingly has everything and yet is still unhappy. You probably know somebody like this. Whether it's material means, money, what have you, they're just not happy. And I can tell you through my practice and through the experiences that I've had, especially with professional athletes, some of these athletes have made tens of millions of dollars, and yet they still struggle with many of the same things that we struggle with as everyday people. Our insecurities, our vanities, not knowing what the future holds, where we're going to go, what we're going to do, what we need to make ourselves happy. Conversely, and you probably all know someone like this as well, there are many people out there that barely have anything, really don't have means to many of the things that we take for granted day in, day out, and yet they still find a reason to get up every day. They find meaning in their lives, they're productive, they impact others in positive ways. And so, I'm fascinated by both cases. And what I've done throughout my career, some of the roles that I've been able to learn firsthand about these things include the following. I've been a clinician now for about 20 years. So I've seen literally thousands of people through my practice. And every time that I'm in front of a client, I'm learning as much from that person, hopefully, as they're learning from me. I make it a job to be a sponge and try to understand what are these commonalities, what are the things, again, that make people tick and make them happy, healthy, and successful. A professor. I've been teaching now. I've taught at 12 different colleges, graduate, undergraduate, business, psychology, and in health departments. Again, some fascinating experiences. Colleagues of mine that I've worked with over the years are world scholars. These are the people that write the books. And again, I try to learn as much as I can from them and their experiences. And then a researcher. I've done a lot of research on performance enhancement. Again, how do people go from good to great? I think that's the title of a book that's actually quite popular. And then really, more than anything, just I study life. I try to learn from the people that I'm around every day. And so it's a very exciting profession that I have. And tonight, I'd like to disseminate some of those ideas, theories, and applications that have, I guess, come through either my office or my personal life. The goal tonight, and I want to emphasize this, is that there is not a quick fix. One thing that I learned very early on is that there are not shortcuts to these things. However, and this is the good news, I think if you take into account the things that we're going to talk about tonight, there are surefire paths to happiness, health, and peak productivity. So the good news is there are algorithms out there that we can follow, and I'll give you a couple examples tonight, that will lead us to a better place. However, it's very rare that we can take shortcuts. And I say that because the human condition is that we often follow the path of least resistance. And in a lot of cases, that makes sense. Coming here tonight, you certainly would have mapped out the easiest way to get to the high school, and that would make sense. But when we're talking about life change and these things that we'll talk about tonight, oftentimes it does require that you roll up your sleeves and put in the work. So if someone came tonight looking for a quick fix, I cannot offer that. But I think I can still offer some ideas that are worthwhile. One other thing I have on this slide, and this is important to set this up. The field of psychology has really morphed over time. If you go back into the history books when the field first turned into its own science, and it really largely developed out of philosophy, early on, what psychologists did was they really helped people who were not doing so well get back to normal. And then it was kind of like we took the training wheels off the bike, pushed you, and then you figured it out from that point. Today, though, and I'd say this has been for at least the last 40 or 50 years, there's been a much greater emphasis, a promotion of positive psychology. And this is really exciting because here we're now looking at average, everyday people that do not have psychopathology, that are just looking to learn how to improve themselves. And I think this is a fascinating time for the field of psychology. And you witness this by going to your bookstore and you see now the self-help books and all the positive and fancy titles. And so this is a good movement that's going on. So the search for happiness. This is kind of where I wanted to start this and get into what that means. Now this is a rhetorical question, but I want you to think about this because some of you that are old enough here tonight remember a time where people really worked a 40-hour work week, right? You also remember a time where department stores closed on holidays. Heck, they even closed on weekends, right? Sunday was a day of rest, a day with your family. Now, we just go, and we go. And I think that's a big part of what I want to talk about tonight is, when does it ever stop? When does it ever end? I know people that I talk to day in, day out that are constantly attached to their social media devices, and it never ends. And I remember, it must have been about 10 years ago, when I first got a chill when I saw this commercial. Maybe some of you remember this. There was a Verizon commercial, and it was a montage of scenes, and the theme of the commercial was always be connected. And this would have been back in, 03, 04. And I remember even then, I was teaching the graduate MBA course, and we talked about that commercial in class about, wow, what does the future hold? And do we always really want to be that connected? Is that always a good thing? Think about it now, some of you that are constantly checking your phones and your other devices, what's the trade-off? We'll come back to that. So, where is that magic finish line? Because in my practice, I often see people that are looking, even if they're not suffering from any psychopathology, they're still striving and they want to do something better. They want to find that happiness that seems to elude them. And we want to know, what is that magic finish line that you're going for? For some people, it's weight loss. For someone else, it's a new pair of boots. For someone else, it's a haircut, not me. For someone else, it's a car. Maybe it's a college degree. Maybe it's a new job, right? But we all set these little goals of things that we think if we have those things in our life, then automatically we'll turn the page. A lot of times it's money. A lot of times it's money. If I had enough money to take care of all my bills, then I would be happy. And then guess what? You get to that point and you find that there are new issues to deal with. And so it never ends. The second question here is, what do you need to do in order to feel happy and fulfilled? If I only had what? Again, a rhetorical question, but even for the young people here tonight, what are the things that make you happy? What do you enjoy doing? Where's your passion and purpose? If you're a parent with one of your kids here tonight, how do you help align those goals? Because it is an active process that you need to do. If you see your son or daughter has a heightened awareness for a certain skill or an activity, are there ways that you can construct that environment to help him or her go down a path that allows them to maximize their interest, their creativity, their ability? And if they're doing that, the old saying goes, you'll never work a day in your life. And I believe that. So do you feel like you sometimes just go, and there's no end in sight? How many of you feel that way sometimes? A lot of you. Half the room. Okay. Well, tonight, take a breath, relax. We're going to be here for a little while, no stress, it's easy. Let me mention one other thing. We're also living in a world today where it almost seems like every little ache, pain, bump, bruise, there's a disorder for it. And there's a magic pill out there to fix it. And I say this because you watch the same TV shows that I do, you read the same magazines that I do, you go to the same internet pages that I go to, and you see pop-ups. And you see, this is an issue, you have it, and there's a pill out there that fixes it. In fact, there was a story in the New York Times just within the past year that said, the title of the article was, "Being Human is Now Pathological." So basically, anything that you have a problem with, in all likelihood, we on the other side of the fence, the clinicians, practitioners, medical team, we probably have some kind of a label for it. And I think that's a dangerous, slippery slope in a lot of ways, and I don't want to get too philosophical here, but when we lose our resiliency, when we enable ourselves, when we enable our kids, when we look for reasons, things that weren't even disorders. In fact, some of you might even work in mental health. Every so many years, the DSM manual comes out. It's the book that we all use to do assessment when we're working with somebody clinically. That book gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and new disorders get added every couple years. And, it really doesn't take much. Right now, ADHD is a really popular disorder, and I often get people who come to my office, and that's the first thing they say. I'm ADHD, so you fill in the blank. It's almost like they've created the excuse not to try. And again, I'm not trying to make a joke of any of this stuff, but when we start to make things look like they're disorders and beyond our realm of improving, then it's quite a hopeless position, isn't it? And so tonight what I want to do is start to look at how do we get back to that resiliency that we might have had a generation ago, when there were fewer disorders, fewer medications, when people got up and dusted themselves off and worked hard and rolled up their sleeves and a lot of good stuff came from that, not only productivity, but self-worth. And I think we can get back to that. And there is a movement of people today that are trying to fight back and say, look, not everything, just because my leg shakes, doesn't mean I have a disorder necessarily. Okay, so you know. What is Utopia? How many of you had an intro psychology class back in college? I'm talking to my adults here. Okay, so you're probably familiar with this pyramid. This is the Maslow pyramid. Abraham Maslow was one of the first psychologists to really push this positive psychology movement. And it's interesting, it won't be a test, but you can see from this pyramid, and I think you have a handout here too, the idea was we kind of pass through these stages in a linear fashion. So each day you wake up and you first take care of your physiological needs. Right? You get something to eat, you get something to drink, use the bathroom, what have you, and then you move on. And what he said was, at the top of this pyramid, a place where very few human beings ever get to, he says, is this place of self-actualization. And the definition is the full realization of one's potential. Now again, we can sit here all night and debate, have you been there before? Once you get there, do you stay there? Do you vacillate between the stages? Does this really exist? But the point in showing you this is that there are people, and have been people in the field of psychology for a lot of years now, looking at what we can do and how we can strive toward being our best. And one of the things that we learned through this is understanding our personal values and where to point our compass in life. So here's our first little point in the evening. One of the things that we do, and this gets us in trouble, is we want to be happier, we want to be more successful, but we haven't taken the time to actually, what we call in science, operationalize what that means. And what I'm saying in lay terms is, how do we get it so that it's specific? What is it that we specifically are looking to do? Are we looking to nurture our creative side? Are we looking to start a new business, a new venture? Are we looking to go back to school and get an advanced degree? Well, what are some of the things that we think will make us happier? And this is the first step. And when we don't take the time to really sort through some of this thought process, it's almost like putting the cart before the horse. So I want you to start thinking, and again, I'm talking to adults here tonight, but in turn, talk to your kids about, what are the things that make you go? Or the observations that you have. I noticed that when you were helping those other kids, you really had a glow on your face. Do you like to help? Yeah, I really do. Okay, what are some things in the future that maybe you can align your daughter with that are toward a helping profession, that kind of ideology? We do have some commonalities amongst all of us here tonight. These are things that most everybody experiences, and I want to go through this for you pretty quickly here. Number one, we want to be accepted. We like to be accepted, welcomed by others. That's important. We have a degree of vanity and self-worth. There are, again, commercials all the time telling us how we can look better. Clothes, hair, makeup, fitness. We want to take care of that part of who we are. We also have this need for homeostasis and control. And this is another big theme tonight. No matter if you're looking at Eastern or Western approaches, you often see these common denominators of having control of your life. And I'll talk about how important this is, not only actually having control, but even the sense of being in control absolutely dramatically minimizes anxiety. And we'll show you a graphic on that tonight. And finally, we have a drive toward identity and achievement. We want to be known, we want to be recognized, we want to have self-worth. And again, that varies from person to person. One person might need to be in the headlines on a marquee. The other person just wants to be recognized within their family for the efforts that they do. But we do strive for that. And so here's when we are our best. Now this is a collection of bullet points that I've studied from clients and from readings and interactions with others. When we are our best. When we're in control of our lives. The old saying is when you have enough lids for your jar, so to speak. Where you're driving the ship. You're proactive. Some of you right now can already think about what you're going to do tomorrow, this weekend. You control it. That's a really good place to be. When our daily actions reflect who we are, when you have an opportunity through your family, your friends, your work, where you can speak on your opinions on things, and when those are validated, even if they're not agreed by others, people validate what you have to say. That's important. We also are best when we are free to express ourselves and when we find meaning in our lives. And finally, and perhaps most importantly, when we find ways to safely, effectively deal with stress. And this is a point I want to make. Effective stress coping is one thing, but healthy stress coping is an entirely different thing. Whenever you do anything that gets your mind off of a stressful situation, it's effective. For adults here tonight, if you have a drink after work and you don't think about your problems, interestingly enough, that's effective. Now, we're not advocating for that because it doesn't meet the second criteria of healthy. So when you look at coping responses, you want to find things that are both effective and help you take your mind off it for a little bit, but are also healthy and aren't going to make the situation worse. And so this is a good point, again, for parents to teach their kids. Any kind of stress mechanism with respect to coping can work, but you want to make sure it's not something that's exacerbating the problem. So when are we our worst? Here are some of those characteristics. Number one, when we feel overwhelmed. And that goes back to what I talked about earlier. When you're going all the time, when you never take a break, what happens? You eat on the run. You don't get enough rest. You actually become more accident prone because you're going and your focus is all over the place. We always hear the terrible stories of people trying to text when they drive, trying to multitask. Okay, a lot of bad things happen then. When we no longer feel any sense of meaning in what we do, when we're not connected to the people around us, whether it's a student or someone here who's an adult in their career, they don't find that meaning anymore. When we lose excitement for life and instead go through the motions. Now, the adults that are in here tonight, there used to be a commercial on, well over 20 years ago now. It was Dunkin' Donuts. Do you remember this commercial? And it was the guy who used to get up every... Yes, okay. Time to make the donuts. I'm sure that's on YouTube. You can dial it up. But it's a really powerful commercial. If you haven't seen it, it was a cartoonish type character who would get up every morning and he just constantly was making these donuts. And he was absolutely what I would call autopilot syndrome. And again, think about how many of us have been in the same thing. Maybe it's not making donuts, but you get up, you go and do the same thing, you go through the motions, you go to bed at night, you do it again tomorrow. And pretty soon, weeks, months, and in some cases, years go by, and you just feel like you've lost yourself. We allow stress to lead to bigger coping problems. Okay, this is again when we're our worst. So you're stressed out, and instead of handling it in a timely and safe and healthy way, you compound it through reckless behaviors, through drinking, drug use, through spending too much time on the internet. And what happens is it exacerbates the conditions. And finally, we stop being the unique and talented people that we are because we're no longer even close to that person anymore. So those are some of the things when we're our worst. The quote at the top of this next slide, have any of you ever read The Road Less Traveled by Scott Peck? Okay, a couple of you. I read this book probably about 25 years ago, and I read a lot, and this book, the very first sentence of the book is what I have in quotations. Those three words. Life is difficult. And I thought it was so powerful, just those three words. Because when you really think about it, and when you really think about people who are successful, be it athletes, world leaders, teachers, whoever it is, they are the ones who are first to practice and last to leave. They are the ones that are a sponge and having conversations with whoever they can so they can learn more, connecting with people, always looking to improve. It's not by happenstance. It's not by chance. It's not coincidental. They're creating it. They're making it happen. So life is difficult. There's not a free ride. It's not an easy venture if you want these things. Happiness and success do not happen passively. It's a very fluid process, and it takes work and effort. So even today, I've had this question before, can you ever get to a point of having a stress-free life? And of course, the answer is no, because even if you're doing everything in your power to control things and live a good, safe, clean life and a healthy life, inevitably something happens, right? A stressor enters in. You get a phone call. You have a relative that's dying. Something bad has happened. Your basement flooded. God, I hope that doesn't happen. That's probably a bad mistake tonight with everything melting out there. But things happen, right? And so all of a sudden you're thrown into, we've got to deal with this stress. So it is a fluid process. But this is a good thing. Fortunately, today, with technology and what we have available, we have a lot of the answers. We have a lot of the answers. Let me give you a perfect example. Weight loss. This is really interesting to me. You see more products every year on TV about weight loss, right? It's one of the most popular things. There's new fad diets. There's different ways you can lose weight. There's all these crazy approaches to how to lose weight. But the interesting thing is, for as long as human beings have walked the face of the earth, we know that if you eat less food and you move more, guess what happens? It's not a secret. You don't even have to spend money on that diet, right? It works. So we know the answers are there. But now the question is, are we committed to doing it? And if we are, in all likelihood, we're going to see results from that. But again, it's a process, and it doesn't just stop because one day you get excited and try something, you have to stay with it. Knowledge is potential power. A lot of times we hear the saying, knowledge is power. But if you hear things, even tonight, even if it's just one thing that kind of makes sense, that you can apply, and you don't do it, again, how important and how valuable is that knowledge? And I always say it's the application of the knowledge that makes it powerful. So I think knowledge is potential power unless we use it. And I want you to use some things we talked about tonight. And finally, you can't always take the path of least resistance in order to have this success. All right, let's switch gears. I want to talk about stress. Because I feel like everybody knows a little bit about this, right? Do you know how expensive stress is? Look at some of these figures. Unhealthy habits, smoking, drinking, reckless behaviors account for 50% of preventable deaths and 70% of preventable healthcare costs. These are things that are 100% under our control. Unlike the next bullet, stress is linked to the top 6 causes of death today, including heart disease and suicide. Infectious disease, that used to be our greatest health concern, has now been replaced by chronic illness. We go so hard, so long, so fast, that we allow ourselves to be so exposed, not only with respect to accidents, but just about anything else that can come our way. We could be short with somebody because we are so overworked. Instead of 40 hours a week, we work 80. So now we're in a conversation and we read somebody wrong, their body language. We get snippy with them. All of a sudden there's a confrontation. Now I'm even more stressed. Now I've got problems at home. I mean, so many of these things so quickly snowball. That's going to come up from time to time. But here's my question. We know that stress impacts these things. Now I'm going to put you guys on the spot. What is stress? What is stress? You could look at the definition there, but what is it? Okay. What did you say?
A pre-apprehension or anxiety of something that's going to occur or has occurred. A lot of anxiety or apprehension about something that may not just happen also.
Right. This is a really tough construct to define. I've taught intro to psychology for many, many years now, and over the years, when you teach classes, they sometimes just mail you these textbooks, whether you use them or not. So I've got books all over the place. And a few years ago, I actually went through a number of these different intro to psychology textbooks to look at the definition of stress. I said, well, you know, we all use this word so regularly, but what is it? And interestingly, none of these books had the same definition. They all vary a little bit. So what I've tried to do is put together a hybrid definition of many of the things that I've come across over the years. So many different definitions, but here's what we know about stress. There's a cognitive and a physical response to events largely based on perception. If you have a pencil or a pen, circle the word perception. That's a big takeaway tonight. A huge takeaway tonight. If you really want to see a dramatically different life beginning tonight or tomorrow, challenge your perceptions. Because there's a lot of meaning here. I'm going to show you in just a moment some of these fun examples. Stressors are the events that trigger a stress response, cognitively and physically. So you have something that happens, say tomorrow, I hope this doesn't happen to anybody, you go out and you turn your car and it doesn't start. In that moment, you get to make an appraisal. Am I challenged by this? I'm going to figure this out. I'm resourceful. I can make a phone call. I've got an understanding boss, husband, wife. I mean, can you work it out? Or all of a sudden, is this a catastrophe? And now all of a sudden, your heart's racing, you're frustrated, you start using curse words, you might punch the car. I mean, all these things happen, and any two people can have that same experience, and the outcome could be 180 degrees different between two people. So, it's not only the things that happen, the stressors, but how we respond to them, how we think about them, and how we physically respond to them. This is huge. So the final bullet point, how we respond ultimately impacts our resiliency. It impacts us psychologically, emotionally, and physically. How you view things. There's a saying out there, one man's garbage is another man's treasure. Have you ever used eBay before? Think about this. Right now, there are literally, in just the time I've been up here, thousands of transactions that have taken place. And in one person's garage or basement is this old weight machine that they're hanging clothes on that has cobwebs and they can't wait to get it out. And yet somebody else halfway across the country is like waiting for the UPS guy to deliver this, right? How many times have you thrown something out down to the curb and before the next morning somebody took it? It's like, who would have ever taken that ripped screen from our patio? So, again, what you perceive ends up being, to a large degree, where you channel your energy, your focus, your thought process, your physical behaviors. Now here's the X factor, and this is for the kids to really tune into this one. We talked a little bit earlier about always being attached to our social devices. We actually have a new term in the literature called technostress. This is the stress that we experience always being connected. And this is kind of a slow-moving issue because we don't often notice it in the moment. But over time, we start to see, wow, I've really missed a lot of work. I mean, I've been there. I've physically been there. But I've been planting plants in Farmville or, talking this kind of stuff. And you know who you are. Being tethered to your device means you are never off the clock. Some of you right now I've seen are checking your text messages. But there is a price to always being connected. And here are some of the things that happen. It impacts our time management, right? I mean, you're behind because you're not keeping up with your work. It increases the need for damage control. I can't tell you in recent years how many times I've either talked to somebody as a friend or had somebody in my office who has put out a tweet or some other electronic message that was taken the wrong way by somebody. It could have been an image, it could have been a sentence, a quote, something. They put it out there, and then sometimes they try to grab it back, but then of course somebody out there got a screenshot, and it's disseminated all over the Olentangy school community, right, Mary? So these things happen. And now you got damage control. Now you got to make up, and that didn't mean that, and I didn't mean to say that. Okay, that's one of the things. It impacts our in-person communication. I know that the kids today probably think we're crazy, but we used to actually talk face-to-face, and we used to write in full sentences, and our spelling wasn't half bad. And now what do you guys do? It's little words, and you do, what is it? JK, right? Just kidding? Yeah, you tell them about it. Okay, so, it's a whole different landscape again. Now, this is not to say that technology is bad, not at all. But there's a cost, there's a trade-off. And I think that a lot of times people who get in trouble where they start falling behind, again, whether it's at the workplace or at home or with their kids, or kids, even within their own friend circles where they're so tied to the social part of growing up that they're missing out on their homework or sport activities, things like that, you pay a price for this. It devalues real-life experiences, right? I mean, it's just easier to look at your device and see what's going on. All right. Stress is determined by what you see. I told you that already. There's two types of stress. Here's another big point for tonight. Most of you, when you think of stress, you think of negative stress. And in the psychology literature, they call that distress. So can you think of a couple examples real quick of things that are traditionally negative, that are negative stressors? Anybody, it would be something that you might consider a negative. Death in a family.
Job loss.
You girls, since you were talking, give me one negative thing. Yeah. Getting a bad grade? All right, I'll give you that one. Getting a bad grade? Yes.
Spraining your ankle.
Can you say it louder?
Spraining your ankle.
Spraining your ankle? Yeah. Okay. So these are examples of negative things. But here's the other side of this, and this is where a lot of people get confused. Good things that happen in life are also stressful. And I have had clients over the years who have said to me, I don't know why I'm so stressed out. Things are great. I love my family. I love my work. I travel. We have a good living. We have money. But something still doesn't feel right. And it might be because of the second term that we call eustress, or good stress. Can you think of a couple examples of things that are viewed typically as good events, but they're still stressful nonetheless? Vacations. That's got to be, we were playing, what's that game Richard Dawson used to do, Family Feud? That might be the top one. Vacations, right way up there, yeah.
Weddings.
Weddings, yes. Yes. Having a baby is another one. Yeah. Boy, you guys got the good ones. Huh? What about what just happened a couple months ago? That period of time at the end of the year. The holidays. The holidays. And you know, when it's the 24th and you run out to the mall and do all your shopping, or, you know, or maybe that's just me. But you know, you do this, I'm not the only one. But eustress is just as taxing as distress. So if you've got a son or daughter here tonight, who's, you know, I don't even know what the highest GPA is. When I was in school, it used to be a 4.0. I know now you can go off the charts. But let's just go back to the 80s. You know, you might have a son or daughter who's a 3.85, you know, this fantastic grade point average. But there's a lot of stress with that. There's a lot of pressure. She wants to do even better. She's upset she doesn't have a perfect 4.0. You know, again, we have to identify that type of stress in the same manner as maybe another son or daughter that you have that's maybe not as academically challenged, but is dealing with distress in some way. You know, maybe it's an ongoing injury in sports that's depressing him, and he can't compete, so he's really taking that to heart. So both sides make a big difference, eustress and distress. So do you see challenges or threats? This is another thing you should circle in your handout tonight. When you see things, and when I say see, that's perception, you know, how you view things. So like tomorrow, if you're a student, and all of a sudden your teacher says, you know what, tomorrow we're going to have a pop quiz, in that moment, what do you see? Do you see a challenge? Okay, you know, I can do this, I've got the materials, I've got the book, I'm going to study hard tonight, I'm going to get this, or do you immediately become threatened by it? There's no way I can do it, I am not smart enough, this is too quick, this teacher's terrible, I can't believe this is happening. Again, two different reactions to the same thing. And guess who gets to make that choice? Every one of you. You get to choose in that moment. Am I rolling up my sleeves and going to attack this, or am I retreating? So what do you see, challenges or threats? If you start to engage in thinking about seeing things as challenges, a lot of nice things happen. And I've got a few here. They prompt a fight response and engage many positive and facilitative processes. When you see things as challenges, for the adults here tonight, you've got a coworker who's just a nag, or a boss who's really annoying. If you're challenged by this, you're now motivated, you're focused, you understand that there's a lot of different ways to build a relationship. If the first way doesn't work, I'll try again. You see, it's a very different approach. But if, on the other hand, you see this bad boss as a threat, you may bottle up. You may resort to other means to cope with stress. It might not be healthy. You may become so frustrated by the experience that you take it home. And now all of a sudden, you know, it's the old kick the dog syndrome. Or yell at your spouse or your kid. Not because they've done anything, but you're just displacing that aggression. And so it's really important to start to galvanize our resiliency and look at life as challenges. Last point, change. Any change that you experience in life will cause stress. Any change, good or bad. Because we get very accustomed to patterns. And when those patterns are disrupted, it prompts us to change our thinking, change our behaviors, and that can be stressful. Think about it like when you go driving. I know, I haven't been up this way in a little while, but I know west of here, help me out, Gary, isn't there a big, aren't they expanding 315? Or, yeah, okay, so I know that's going to, yeah. And I know the first time I drove up there a few months ago, it was like, wait a minute, whoa, what am I going to do? You know, sometimes we let these things really snowball and take away our day at times. We become so frustrated. So anyway, I just wanted you to think about any change will take us out of our comfort zone. We also know that there are some variables that can greatly help us deal with stress and maximize our abilities. And these are things that have been found in empirical research. This is what social psychologists and positive psychologists, people study. And I want to give you some of this information because it's quite handy. 3 variables that mediate the stress response. Predictability is number 1. So things that you can reasonably predict will help you lower stress. So if you can predict, if you're a student here tonight, that probably sometime in the weeks ahead, my teacher is going to make us do a take-home book report or a paper or some other project. If you can predict that with a reasonable degree of being right, you can already start to minimize some of your stress. Control. Learning about the things that you control. How can I control this situation? Well, what are the things that I control? I can have a good attitude. I can ask for help when I need it. If I don't do so well, maybe I can talk to that teacher afterwards to see what I can do to improve. Again, taking control of the situation. And then finally, optimism. You know, you're not born optimistic or pessimistic. And people who tend to look at the jar as half full rather than half empty do better with stress. Again, it's probably not that shocking to you. We also need to discern between what we call acute stress and chronic stress. Acute, did anybody have any traffic getting here tonight? It was a little bit later, okay. You know, traffic jams are a good example of acute stress. It's the stuff that's in the here and now, and it quickly passes. Think about it this way. Have you ever been to a beach, and you've got a little piece of sand in your shoe, a little stone? What's that feel like? It's kind of annoying, isn't it? And what do? You take your shoe off, right? You don't do that, okay. That's what I want to suggest to you for the little things. So if you have an argument with a friend, if you're a student here tonight, you know, you don't do so well on one quiz, maybe somebody was rude to you. If you're an adult, maybe you didn't get that promotion this week, but there are other things ahead. Again, discern between the here and now acute stress that you can move past versus the second type of stress is what we call chronic stress. An ongoing illness, conditions of poverty, environments that are unsafe. These are the conditions that are longer lasting and that need to be looked at very differently than the acute stress. So this is, again, another big point because, again, I'll share with you in my world, a lot of the times the people that I work with are so stressed out, but they're stressed out over the acute things. The things that 2 days from now they won't even remember happened. But in that moment, they're going to just let it crush their day. And I'm encouraging you today to just kind of move past that, okay? And spend your greater focus on the chronic stress. There's also a technique we call stress inoculation. And if you've ever gotten a flu shot before, it works in the same manner. So the idea behind a flu shot, if you get one, is that when you come in contact with the flu virus, you're guarded against that. You're protected. The same thing with stress inoculation. So think about right now, as I'm talking, what do you have, again, whether you're an adult or a youngster here this evening, what do you have in front of you in the next couple days, the next week or two, that's going to be stressful? Are finals coming up? Do you have a spring sport you're trying out for where there's a tryout period and there might be cuts? If you're a teacher, you know, are you gearing up for the end of the year? If you work outside of a school system, you have project deadlines that are coming up. If this were another time in the calendar year, I would say the holidays, if we were back a few months ago. The idea here, though, is that you use this technique to mentally rehearse and prepare for those stressful situations before they occur. And if you can go through a game plan, albeit 5, 10, 20 seconds, you don't even have to spend a lot of time here, but if you can think through, okay, this is the end of the term, I know I've got 4 tests this Friday, and it's Tuesday, right? I mean, even simply doing this, okay, how am I going to allocate my time? What am I going to do? Tonight I'll study this subject. Tomorrow during study hall I'll do this. But you start walking through, this is stress inoculation, and you're actually minimizing your stress. Rather than, and this has happened to everybody, I'm sure, where you've been around somebody, or maybe you've done it before, where all of a sudden, whoa, they're shocked by something that they've known for 6 months was going to happen. And you think, but you knew this. You know, you've been in denial, you've ignored it, but it's here. These cognitive behavior ideas might be better than mental disorders, self-fulfilling prophecies, and prescribed drugs because there's no side effects. That's the beautiful thing about what we're talking about here. So I'm not banging on psychopathology, and I'm not banging on meds or anything like that, but what I am saying, I can't imagine there's a single person in this room tonight that wouldn't like to improve the quality of their life or their children by using techniques that have no side effects. They don't require a label, no psychopathology, no disorder, no mental disorder. These are just techniques that you can use and immediately see a lift in the overall quality and productivity of your life. I think it's great stuff. Delving deeper with control. I mentioned earlier When you're in control of things, you have a lower degree of stress. And so if you look at this teeter-totter here, the arrows, there's what we call an inverse relationship between stress and control. And all that means is the more you feel in control, the lower your stress will be. The less control you have, the greater your stress will be. So control and stress are inversely related. Now, here's a really interesting part of this. Studies have even shown that when they do research in this area and they ask people, how in control of your job, your marriage, whatever it is, how in control are you? Even in situations where the individual truly isn't in control, things are happening beyond what they can control, if they think they're in control, they still have lower stress. So even the perception of, I got this, will lower your stress. Pretty amazing. And it's been borne out in research. So here's a time in the evening where I'm going to give you guys some fun perception exercises and ask you what you see. So are you ready to participate? Okay, this is where you're going to do some talking. So the first one, let me just set this up. Human perception, what we see is dependent on many different things. Anybody have a police officer in the family? Okay. Police officers know this. If they arrive at the scene of a crime and two eyewitnesses have the same exact story, they know that only one thing could have happened. What was it? They talked. That's it. Because no two of us here tonight are going to see the same thing. That's just the way it is. I remember, this was probably 10, 12 years ago, and this is a true story that's happened to me, and after this event happened to me, I was sold forever. We were downtown, a group of friends, and it was the Great Pizza Cook-Off, and they still do this every year in Columbus, where all the pizza vendors come together, and you pay $5 or $10, and you sample the pizza and you go. Well, this was when it used to be in German Village. And I remember, after we had gone to the event, we were walking in, it was dusk, it was still lit, it was actually probably better lit than this auditorium tonight, and we were walking down the sidewalk, and it was a horrible sound, but I heard someone was trying to cross High Street and was hit by a car. And it all happened so quickly that as we heard the impact, we turned, and no sooner than we turned, this car had barreled up over the curb and was coming right at us. So we jumped out of the way, it was a hit and run. Moments later, an ambulance came, it was just a horrific scene. And aside from that being just a terrible thing to witness, the other thing that I remember that applies here is a police officer came up to us, there were about 4 or 5 of us. Prior to the police officer asking us what we saw, I would have promised you I could have told you the make, model, and color of that car. My God, it almost hit me. I mean, how could I not, right? Well, the police officer made a mistake, and I didn't know this at the time. But he asked each one of us what we saw in front of one another. Instead of sequestering us and asking, he just asked right down the line. And by the time it got to me, I absolutely could not believe that all 4 or 5 of us had very different stories of what we saw. And it was in that moment where I said, wow, you think you see, but you don't see. I mean, it's true, and I'm sure if we had time tonight, you would all have a story. Heck, any of you like magic? I mean, when you see a woman get cut in half, right? I mean, it looks like she's cut in half, right? She's really not. I'll give you one other fun example, and then we'll get into these. I have a friend of mine who, for many, many years, would do up-close hand magic, just the stuff with the hands. And he does this one trick, and it's really good, but again, it shows perception, that what we're looking for often impacts what we see. And so the trick that he does, I wish I could do this, but I'm not a magician, but he rolls up his sleeves, so he just has his hands, and he takes a real cigarette. It's real, and it's lit. And he takes a puff on it for drama, and then he takes his hand like this, and he drops the cigarette in his hand. And then he pushes it like this, and he opens his hand, both his hands, and the cigarette's gone. Does anyone know where that cigarette goes? Any guesses? Okay, good guess. Not down the sleeve, but that's a good guess. Where? Mouth? No, that's a good guess too. On the ground's a good guess. No? What do you think?
I was going to say that.
I can't hear.
I was going to say before that there is the ground.
She was going to say the floor.
The ground, yeah. Well, here's how this trick is done. It's none of those places. Those are great guesses. But you know what he does? It's a fake plastic thumb. And years ago, the Yankee Trader used to be downtown. That store that closed. They used to sell these things. They were like $1. It's a plastic thumb. And so here's how the trick goes. He starts out, and he's talking, and he's got this plastic thumb on. And of course, you're not looking over here. here, you're looking at the person, right? Why would you look at someone's thumb? So at one point in the trick, he takes his left hand and he actually pulls it off. Now he doesn't do it like I just did, he does it very casually, but in the palm of his hand, he now has a plastic hollow thumb. So then he takes his cigarette and he drops it in and he stands there and smoke's coming out. I mean, it really, even now that I know the trick, I still, back up because, you just don't see somebody's hand on fire, right? So then he pushes it out, and the next to last push is with his thumb, putting it back on. And then he continues with his pointer finger, and when he opens his hand, where are you looking? If you ever see this trick done, I promise you it will be so painfully obvious that this man is wearing a plastic thumb with a black tip right in your face, and you won't even see it. I've seen him do this hundreds of times. It's the greatest trick in the world, and I just blew it, but it's a great trick. One of these days I'm going to learn how to do it so I can really impress you. Okay. Oh, let me go back to this second, just a second. So human perception is very subjective. One man's garbage is another man's treasure. Shakespeare said, nothing is good or bad, but thinking makes it so. So we are the ones that attach the meanings to what we see. One last person, and then we're going to go into some slides here. Albert Ellis is a famous psychologist who came up with a theory, a counseling theory, known as rational emotive behavioral therapy. Now, you don't need to remember that. But the part of this approach that I really like has all to do with the ABCs. And Ellis said, things that happen, events in our lives are what we call A. So tonight would be an event. It's not good or bad, it's not right or wrong. You guys got phone calls, these good people over here bugged the heck out of you to come tonight. You didn't know what you were in store for. So it's just, it really has no value, according to Ellis. But the second part, I'm going to use my little red pointer, this B point right here is perhaps the most important point. It's your belief of events. So if you came here tonight, according to Ellis, and thought, hey, maybe this guy has something good to say, maybe I'll pick up something, I appreciate my community for bringing speakers in. If you came in with that type of an attitude, chances are the behavioral consequence was you're sitting upright, you're taking notes, you're participating, you're having a good time. Ellis would also say, though, if your subjective belief was, oh my God, I have to go there tonight? Mom, why are you making me go there? If you go into it with your own subjective negative view, then chances are the consequence is you're slouching in your seat, you're texting, you're drawing pictures of me, whatever. It's just not the same experience as though if you went into a positive attitude. So this is a really nice approach. And one of the things that I try to do therapeutically when I work with people is challenge that belief piece. How are you viewing that? You students here tonight, think about your teachers. Sometimes, and we were all students, we all went to school, we heard those stories of those teachers, oh my God, don't take so-and-so for that class. And we go into it with a bad attitude without even qualifying it for ourselves. So again, don't let yourself get caught up in this stuff. Okay, what do you see? Okay, you see a lady's face, you see a man playing a saxophone. Okay, does anybody see a purple elephant? Okay, get my card on the way out if you do. That's it. Okay. No. But there are two images, the horn player and the woman. Okay. What do you see here? This is the famous old woman, young woman. Can you see both? Okay, again, depending on what you're looking for, you'll see. For those of you that haven't pictured it yet, this is looking at the young woman from behind, and this is the old woman's nose and mouth, so you can see. You got it? These only get better. I'm just warming up. Okay. I combed the internet for you guys. Read this. Read it. All right. Read it again. All right. Anything weird about that? What's this? Most people go right past that and they don't catch the second dot. If you caught it, you're good. Okay, this one, I want to set this up. Oops. In a moment, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a list of words. Without writing anything down, put your pens and pencils down. I want you to look at this list of words and try to memorize them. Okay? I'm going to give you 20 or 30 seconds here. Okay, try to memorize as many words here as you can. That's about 20 or 30 seconds. Okay. So do you feel like you got that list memorized? You feel pretty confident? Okay. All right. Let's just see. All right. I want you to throw your hand up when I ask you this. How many of you saw the word bed? How many of you saw sleep? Higher. Why me sleep? I get you this? All right. I probably got half the room on that. Now, it's not that you're cognitively deficient. You don't need counseling or anything like that. But here again shows you how we connect the dots cognitively. The expectation is that word will be there. All of those words are around sleep. And so you expect it to be there. I challenge you, how many times do you connect the dots? Well, that teacher looks kind of tough and he has a loud voice, so he must be the worst teacher in the school. You know, you think about how many times we do that. Count the number of F's, as in Frank. How many F's?
Six.
There are actually 14. I'm just kidding. I have to do this because it's still late. No, there are six. There are six. Most people pick up 3, though. But there are 6. And some of you are still counting, so I know that I got you. And that's okay. I have to tell you, I blew every one of these. That's why they're in my presentation, because I messed them all up. But most people do not get the O's. And why is it? It's at the end, and phonetically, it's spelled what? O-B. So that's another example of how we can be tricked with our perception. So I think I've made my point here tonight that perception is a very delicate, subjective, ever-changing process. And a big, big piece to lowering stress, maximizing productivity, happiness, wellness, all of these things really has to do with how you frame things. Challenge your irrational beliefs. Cognitive behavioral psychologists operate largely on that premise, that we get stressed out and have problems when we start to look at things irrationally. If you get a low grade on a quiz, it's not the end of the world. There are many, many more opportunities to improve. If you don't get that job promotion, chances are there will be something else where you can cull your resources and pick up and maybe go in a different direction. It's never as catastrophic, or rarely is it ever as catastrophic as we make it out to be. So, these are some examples about perception. All right, so this final picture, what do you see? Roses. Okay. This last one, there's no gimmick to it or anything like that. It's to illustrate, and obviously you're at a distance here, but when you see a picture like this is the perfect metaphor of, do you see the flowers or do you see the thorns? They're both there. Where you choose to focus your attention will be what you ultimately see. So, of course, I'm going to encourage you to look at the flowers. Let's talk about optimal balance. This is the final leg of this discussion tonight. And this is my own opus or lifelong theory. It's a working theory, and it is based on all of the things that we've talked about thus far. Our level of optimism, predictability, how we manage stress, taking into account the importance of emotional wellness. All of these concepts that I've talked about tonight have really funneled to this, and I hope that there will be a few takeaways as we get into this. So it borrows from lifespan psychology, and lifespan psychology is interesting. It's the approach to psychology that looks at the events that typically happen over the course of a lifetime. So, for example, if you're a teenager here tonight, what are the things that are most important to a teenager? I'll just ask you. What's most important? Friends, right? Phone, social activities, parties, fun. Yeah, okay. And that's normal. That's normal. If you weren't invested in those things and instead, did something that kids don't usually do, and I can't even think of how my head what that would be, that might be an atypical type of event. But those are normal things. For adults, if you're in your 20s, early 20s, mid-20s, what are some of the normal things that you experienced during that time? What's that? Dating? Dating or mating? Mating, dating. Oh. Okay. Getting into a career, right? A spouse, a family, okay? And again, we can go through and through the lifespan and talk about normative markers, things that we typically experience. But you also have unique values that are different than those norms. So even though at 25 or 30 it's normal to start with your career, maybe settle down and begin a family, again, if you're just looking at statistics, you also have unique values. And sometimes we get away from those things because we don't find them to be important or of value. And here's another personal story that happened to me that kind of blossomed this whole idea years ago. I was in graduate school, I was working on my PhD, I was really invested in it, having a good experience, but it was taxing, it was long days. And one day I was sitting in a coffee shop, just by myself, clearing my head, I was very stressed out, and I started to doodle. And I was just drawing. And it was really fun. And it reminded me, when I was a kid, I was that kid in the classroom that was drawing the caricatures of the teachers. I was doing that. I enjoyed doing that. I enjoyed drawing and painting and just different things. I don't know if I was any good at it, but I enjoyed the process. And so while I was doing it that day over a cup of coffee, I thought, my goodness sakes, it's been years since I even bought a pad or pens and pencils. Like, I haven't done this in so long. And I don't care if anybody sees this. I'm not looking to sell this. This might be cruddy for all I know, but I'm enjoying it. And I thought, wow, we get away from the things that we enjoy doing. Some of you like to cook and you haven't cooked in months or years. Some of you like to golf and you haven't found time to do that in a long time. Some of you like to read, but you can never get around to reading because you got kids running all over. So I'm challenging you tonight to think about one thing that's unique to you, that you value. It doesn't matter what the world thinks, it doesn't matter if it's important, of any value whatsoever, but you like to do it. And can you find a couple minutes each week? It doesn't have to be hours or days, even 10, 15 minutes. Can you find time to do it? And I promise you, if you prioritize that and not let it be an afterthought, because when we let it be an afterthought, you'll get around to it, what happens? We never get around to it. And so you have to prioritize some of these things that make you unique and not just go through the motions. Otherwise, you'll be on autopilot. So you have unique values that need to be nurtured. You also want to value, and this is going to sound a little bit crazy because we don't say this anymore. We take pride in go, 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 right? I'm saying here, find downtime. Most of the people that I find that are unhappy or not as successful as they could be or should be, they're tired. They don't take downtime. They don't take breaks. They sleep 3-4 hours a night. They're always going. It's almost impossible to be the best student you can be, to be the best athlete you can be, to be the best spouse that you can be when you're tired. It's one of the first building blocks to living. So value downtime, creativity, and self-expression. You know, I've got videos that I show when I teach intro to psychology. People have been drawing, painting, scripting, scratching on surfaces for as long as human beings have been on the earth. We all have a creative, self-expressive personality, persona. It doesn't mean that we're all going to be world-famous artists. I'm not talking that. But we have this need for cathartic expression, for getting out what's on the inside. And so I'm urging you to find opportunities to get your downtime, to find ways to be creative with your life, and to allow for opportunities of self-expression. What is your unique life path? So this optimal balance idea was really studied, or was developed by studying people that I found to be pretty successful. You know, and over the course of my life, there have been a number of people that I just really admire. Wow, they multitask in a super way. They get so many things done. They're good at what they do. They've got great personalities. They're engaging. They will find the time to help you. You know, they're just really good people. And so I try to study this. And again, we all face anxieties, uncertainties, battles with confidence, but it's what we do in these moments that count. So you're not alone right now. If you're stressed, if you're anxious, if you're worried, join the rest of us. But what happens is, and do any of you like to garden? I should ask this first. Maybe you like to garden? Okay. I use the garden metaphor. You know, and it's corny, and I know it, but it makes the point. You would only put in your garden things that you want to what? Yeah, grow, eat, right. Do the same with your life. Put the things into your life that make you you. You know, be proactive. Take control of that. You know, find those things that make you special, unique, and different, and important in your own eyes. You know, let's boost that self-esteem and self-confidence, and make sure we do it. Because we do have all these same battles. It begins by identifying personal goals, personal values, and then taking control, like plants in a garden. Pretty simple idea. But you also have to have proportional balance. You all have fixed blocks in your schedule. If you're a student, you have X amount of hours each week that you have to be in school, in the classroom. That's a fixed block. If you're employed, it's the same thing. You have X amount of hours to your career. You might also have X amount of hours devoted to some other fixed block in your schedule. But after a while, you start to get to that good time, that flex time, that you can do with it what you want. Ask yourself right now, what are you doing with that time? And no matter what you've been doing up until 8, 10 tonight, how does that change tomorrow if it needs to? How do you empower yourself? Again, it's not a bad thing to be critical of yourself. If you can say right now, wow, I do spend a lot of hours on the computer. And because of that, I'm not around my kids as much as I should be. Or I'm not doing these things at work that I should be. You can change that. You can fix that. You don't need a running start. You don't need to wait 5 years to get that going. That can actually happen by tomorrow. I'm not real big on New Year's resolutions because I think when you get to a point, and in the way that you do this, the way that you get out of the comfort zone, in my opinion, is you have to be in one of two conditions, inspiration or desperation. You can't kind of want to change big habits. So if you're a cigarette smoker, you can't just kind of want to quit smoking. You either have to be truly inspired and know, I have a friend that quit, and boy, he used to smoke 2 packs a day, I only smoke 1, I can do this. Or desperation. Desperation moves people too. I'll tell you as a professor, I can't tell you how many students over the years, when they get that little pink slip sent to them from the college saying you're about to flunk out, all of a sudden, bam, they start coming to class, they even go to the library, they don't know what it is, what they're supposed to do, but they know they should be there. It makes you change behavior. And then you want to beat stress. This is pulling the weeds. If you see things that are happening, wow, I'm putting on some weight, wow, I'm not sleeping as well, wow, this situation in my life is really snowballing, I'm thinking about it all the time. How do you pull those weeds? How do you address those situations before they really snowball into bigger things? So just to summarize here, your garden, put the things in that you want to do, find the things that make you you, the things that you find important, not what the world thinks or that you're going to make money off of or status or anything, but the things that make you tick. And find a way to enter them into your life in a proportional way, and at the same time, pull those weeds along the way, those stressors. When we're out of balance, this is what happens. Too much of one thing causes a problem. So I always do this with my hands because it makes a point. When you're working all the time, you're not at home. When you're traveling all the time, you're eating food on the run, you're not at home eating good meals. There's always this gap. And what we try to do internally is minimize that gap. We're striving for homeostasis. We like it when things are under control, but we're always tipping one way or the other. And so think about right now, what are you doing too much of at the expense of something else that you're not doing enough of? Imbalance. When we're imbalanced, when we're working too much and not doing these other things that make us the people we are, here's some of the things that you can expect to happen. And these happen all the time. You have increased stress and unrest. You might have sleep problems even. You begin to feel hopeless that tomorrow's going to be like the next day, the next day, the next day. It just is a sense of hopelessness. You go through the motions. And when you go through the motions, you don't give your best effort. So you're not the best employee, you're not the best student, you're not the best athlete. And when you see that, your confidence takes a hit and it becomes a vicious closed cycle. Your self-confidence and self-esteem takes a hit. And I know from working in athletics, confidence is vitally important. In fact, we know there's a direct correlation. The more confident you are, the better you'll perform. So we want your confidence to be high. The poor results further hinder future self-growth, and then you have a greater need to cope with the stress. A couple of other notes here, and then we'll wrap this up. Downtime and creativity. I want to go back to this because it's such an unfamiliar message. People don't normally hear this. People usually hear go, 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 work, 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 more, more, more. I'm saying pull back. Most people overlook or devalue the importance of downtime and creativity. It's what I call, I'll get around to it. You probably all have projects at your house and you've been trying to get around to, in some cases for years. These things actually help us with cathartic expression, stress relief, and even flow, getting in the zone when we do things we like to do. But again, it is important to prioritize downtime and even creativity. A couple other slides here. Another psychology term, don't worry, there won't be a test on this, but this is another important point. There's an idea in psychology called locus of control. And it's by a scientist by the last name Rotter. And what Julian Rotter suggests is that people tend to operate on one or the other. Not exclusively, but we tend to be one or the other. If you are the person who is of an external locus of control, when things happen to you, you immediately point this way. It's not a healthy place to be. I got a bad test score because of that teacher. I didn't get that job because of politics. My kid's not on the Little League team because the league operator doesn't like me. That's not a good place to be. People on the other side of it who have what we call an internal locus of control tend to look inward first. Your more successful people will do this. If I didn't get a good test score, I'm turning here. Did I study? Did I read the book? Was I committed to doing well in this class? If I ask those questions, I'll get more fruitful answers, more reality-based answers. So you want to try to operate more from an internal locus of control, turning inward. What can I do to improve the situation? How can I impact this situation better? And when you start to do that, the old Socratic method, if we ask the right questions, we'll get the right answers. It's a very, very powerful approach. And self-efficacy is the last term I'll talk about tonight. Dr. Al Bandura came up with this idea. And Bandura says that, and actually they found this through research as well, that when we test people ahead of time and determine their level of confidence before a task or activity. What's your first name? Sean? Okay, so if I say, you say Sean or John? Sean. So if I say to Sean, we're at the free throw line, and I say, you're going to get 10 shots, how many do you think you can make? And Sean's going to say, of course, 9. Right? Because he's really good. Okay, if he really believes that and has a high degree of confidence, chances are he's going to shoot closer to 9. Versus if he went in and said, I'll be lucky if I make 1. In that case, he probably will be lucky if he makes 1. So we know that when you feel confident as you approach tasks, and that's really an internally driven mechanism. Looking inside, you know what? I'm an intelligent person. I'm a resourceful person. I've got great family, friends, people around me that can help. I can do this. When you start to engage in that kind of dialogue, good things happen. Self-efficacy goes up, and the chances for a peak performance increase as well. So here are my final questions for you tonight. Are you optimally balanced? Or are you upside down in that stress cycle that I talked about? Are your daily actions reflective of where you would like your time to be spent at this point in your life? If not, let's change it. Are you currently watering the right plants? Are you putting your time and effort into the right things, the things that define you and allow you to reach your full potential? Do you have a healthy proportional balance between work, school, family, and other endeavors of interest to you? And finally, is techno-stress getting in the way? And I say that because I'm seeing it more and more as a problem for people. Strengthening resiliency, here's some takeaways of how you can improve. And again, even if you just pull a few things that I talked about tonight, I really believe these things can be catalysts for much bigger things. And I hope someone somewhere down the road sends me an email with a great success story of something we talked about tonight that just lit them up. You want to write down specific, measurable, controllable goals and journal the results. This is powerful. You don't want to just be happy. You don't want to just be successful. You want to define, what does that mean? Is that an advanced degree? Is it a career? Is it a grade in a class? Okay, you want to write those down. And you want to journal your progress along the way. Keep daily notes. You want to start each day with a positive attitude. You get to choose it. So when you wake up tomorrow, no matter what it looks like outside, how crummy it is, you get to smile. You're in a good part of the world. We have a lot of great resources, right? I mean, there's worse places than here. So you want to remind yourself of good things. Engage in physical activity regularly and prioritize rest. Find 20, 30 minutes a day of doing something, even if it's walking. Benefits are huge. Again, prioritize rest. Develop a cathartic mechanism. And all that means is finding ways that you can get things off your chest on a regular basis. We know that social support is a mediating variable to wellness. And what that means is when we have others in our corner in life who simply support us. They've done research where they've taken people in a hospital with similar conditions and looked at one patient who had barely any visitors versus another patient with a similar condition who gets regular visitors. Who do you think gets better faster? It's the second person almost always. Because think about this. When the people come into the hospital, in this example, to see you, what do they come in doing? They're smiling, they're bringing flowers, candy, they're engaging in positive talk with you. I mean, it's a good thing. And it puts your body in motion to really do well, and get out of here. So you want to have that. And then remember the ABCs. That final, that middle piece, the B, your beliefs have everything to do with the outcomes that you'll experience. So, the next time you have a challenge at work, a challenge in the classroom, a challenge in sports, look at yourself and ask, what can I do to act upon the situation? How do I have the tools to succeed here? And I use this one a lot, and this is my last one. If you keep on doing what you've always done, you'll keep on getting what you've always got. If you want things to be different, if you want better, you're probably going to have to change your paradigm, change your approach. If you do tomorrow what you did yesterday, you'll probably get the same results. So if you're a student and you're having trouble in a class, doing tomorrow what you've been doing the past couple weeks might not be enough. You might need to change that approach a little bit. Otherwise, you'll probably get the same result. And that's what I hear. Insanity, doing the same thing, yet expecting different results. And on that note, that's all I have for you tonight. But I'm happy to stick around and answer questions. I know it's been a long time for you guys to sit. Thank you.
Any questions? Well, you're right, you did.
I covered it all.
You covered it all.
I really appreciate you guys coming out tonight, and especially since this was canceled once earlier. Thank you. There are materials out front. There are red cards, I hope, went around. If anybody wants to follow up with me, the website is on the handout. Any questions, anything I can help you with, please reach out. Thanks again, guys.
And I just want to take a moment to remind you our next presentation is Wednesday, March 19th. We'll probably be sending out phone calls and also on the listserv. Please join us then. Fill out the evaluation forms. We read every one and we take your suggestions. Thanks so much for coming.